This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. My email address, jason@sportsspectrum.com. jason@sportsspectrum.com. And we are presented today by IJM, the International Justice Mission, helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. Check them out at ijm.org/TF to learn how you can become a Freedom Partner today. Very excited to welcome Thomas Morstead to Sports Spectrum. Thomas has been in the NFL since 2009, selected in the 5th round of the 2009 NFL Draft, pick number 164. And interestingly enough, Thomas is the punter for the New Orleans Saints. Punters don't get selected too often in the NFL Draft. Thomas not only was selected by the Saints, but he's still a part of the Saints 12 years later. He's now going into his 12th season in the NFL here in 2020. In that first season in the NFL back in 2009, Thomas became a Super Bowl champion. That success came really quickly for him. Super Bowl 44 when the Saints beat the Colts and won their first ever Super Bowl title, and Thomas has a ring for that. He was also selected to the Pro Bowl in 2012 and currently holds the record for most kickoff touchbacks in one game. He had 9 of them when the Saints beat the Colts in a regular season game in 2011, 62-7. He also has the record for most touchbacks in a single season with 68 back in 2011. But Thomas isn't just a punter. Now he's an author. He's got a new book out. It's called The Middle School Rules of Thomas Morstead, as told by Sean Jensen. He and Sean work together and collaborate on this book that is really directed towards middle school age, and even you could even say elementary age kids. And we're all looking for good content for our kids to read, for our kids to gather, especially faith-based content. You know, some of it might be a little over their heads. Well, this book right here, The Middle School Rules of Thomas Morstead, is perfect for your, let's say, 8 to 12-year-old boy or girl that's interested in learning about an amazing journey that Thomas Morstead has had. On the back of the book, it says, before he earned a Super Bowl ring and started a foundation, he had to survive middle school. This is a fun conversation with New Orleans Saints punter Thomas Morstead, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Thomas Morstead, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Yep, thanks for having me on, Jason.
Yeah, man, good to talk to you. I mentioned the word author in our introduction. Is that a little weird for you to hear the name Thomas Morstead, an author, as you got this new book now that you wrote with Sean Jensen called The Middle School Rules of Thomas Morstead? Is that weird to kind of hear the word author next to your name?
It is. Sean convinced me that I was officially the author with him, although I really gave him the stories, and he wrote them down in an interesting way and in a way that would be engaging with kids. So, but I'll take it.
Tell us about this project, why you wanted to be a part of it. I love the Middle School Rules series, and I've known Sean for a long time, who helped you write this book, and he has such a passion for young people and reaching young people with amazing stories. And you have this now with this book, The Middle School Rules of Thomas Morstead. So tell us about why you wanted to be involved in the project.
Well, Sean reached out to me actually a few years ago after the Minnesota Miracle game to interview me about what happened there. And he just asked if we could stay in touch. And I said, yeah. And he sent me a few of his other middle school rules books, asked me what I thought about them. And I started reading them to my kids. We loved them. And then one day he asked if I'd want to be the next player to be highlighted. And, I was blown away by the offer. I'm a punter for a small market team. I was like, you trying to sell books here or what? And he was like, hey, you got a great story, and I'd love to be able to write your story. And so I agreed to do it. It's been a wonderful process. Sean's been a joy to work with. He's a total pro. And it was really, really very rewarding to go through and do it and speak with people from my past and maybe some people that didn't realize how impactful they were. And And then it was also cool for me to hear stories from other people that were interviewed that shared stories that I didn't remember and ways that I impacted them. So it's been really rewarding to go through that process.
I remember when I wrote my first book and I went through that process, and I kind of had the same thing as you. I had a co-author that helped me kind of write the book and pull stories out of my journey. And I remember not remembering some of these stories until you start having conversations and you're like, oh my gosh, did that really happen? Did I go through that?
Yeah.
You said that other people were interviewed, which is a little different than the way I wrote my book. But I wonder for you, what was the one story or the one kind of emotion that took place for you when you came away and started thinking about what it was like to be a middle schooler yourself? That's a long time ago. A lot of us we remember things, but we don't have those vivid memories sometimes, or don't have them, right at the back of or forefront of our minds. We have to kind of be reminded of them sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, look, there was a story of a friend of mine who was going through some things, and actually in high school, and we we had been friends for a long time, and then we didn't hang out for a number of years, and we kind of got reconnected, and I kind of pulled him out of a tough place that he was in, and I did not know that until we wrote this book.
Wow.
And so that was it was cool, and we actually recently went on vacation together, and it was after he had been interviewed by Sean, and it was just cool to be on vacation with him and his wife, and for him to sit down and kind of say thank you, because he never had. I didn't realize that I had helped in that way, and so it was really just things like that is really cool.
What was middle school Thomas Morstead like? Like when you thought back, maybe even before you put the book together, when you thought back to the 12-year-old version of yourself, how would you describe yourself?
I would say outwardly insecure. I always feel like one of my lucky things that I've had is I've always had a pretty strong internal compass of like who I was, and but I didn't have a lot of confidence outwardly, socially. But I think a lot of times when the kids that are most confident at that age are the least secure people, and you don't realize it till you get older. But I think the kids that kind of go through vulnerable periods and have to deal with those types of things and kind of struggle, those end up being the kids that end up being the most secure down the road, I think. So, I don't think I thought of myself as anything special, but I didn't think anybody was more special than me, if that makes sense. And, I've always just tried to stick to my convictions, and I think that's something that is evident in the book. And, but I think it took a long time for me to kind of have more of a outward confidence. It really took me till about college for that to happen. So,
was sports always something that you gravitated to at an early age?
Yes, I loved athletics. Loved competing. Being an athlete was always something I saw in my future or dreamed about. Once I get into junior high and high school, I would say I was pretty self-aware. And so I really studied hard. I was the smallest boy in high school, my freshman year of high school.
Wow.
And so I couldn't really compete at anything. I was at a big Texas 5A high school. And so, I loved it. I love sports, loved competing, but I just couldn't compete. And so I really studied hard and made really, really good grades, and actually got an engineering scholarship to go to walk on at SMU. So that's also part of the story that's kind of special. I told Sean we may have to do a college rules of Thomas Morstead one day, because all the really good stories come after high school. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about a few of those stories. The first one you actually write about in your book. It's called The Middle School Rules of Thomas Morstead, but the story is of you going to England with your Uncle Charlie. Can you share that story, what happened and how it changed your life? Because it was a pretty powerful story, and I loved how Sean wrote about it.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up going to England. My mom's from England. My dad grew up there, and it's just a totally different world than I grew up in. So it was kind of special to go out there and, you know, I think a lot of kids are very, don't have the kind of the blessing of seeing different perspectives, the ways different people live. And so going from kind of a suburb of Houston to a little village in Lincolnshire, England, it was just eye-opening. It was fun. It was something that was exciting. And anyhow, I had cousins that were my age, and so we'd go over there, and if they were in season with rugby, I'd go practice with their team. And my Uncle Charlie just taught me to punt a rugby ball in the backyard and how to spiral it. And, you know, some people love to golf and go hit golf balls on Sundays, and I kind of got obsessed with punting on my street back home. And so I just kind of learned with a rugby ball, which is more like an egg. It's not as pointy, so it's a little easier to learn. And then transition to a football that was like a composite, kind of a, you know, bouncier ball, and then transition to leather. And but I just loved doing it. And so he introduced me to that probably when I was about 11. And so it was pretty cool.
You realized when that you were pretty good at this punting thing? Was it in high school at that point?
Well, look, I thought I was pretty good in junior high. I actually specialized as an 8th grader. I mean, you don't see a lot of that at that age. And but I was so small, and I broke my leg the first play of high school in 9th grade.
The first play?
First play of, it was a scrimmage, actually, 9th grade. On a kickoff, some team that we were scrimmaging, a guy came from the front line, and before the ball was even caught, I was on the ground. Broke both bones in my left leg, and I just kind of said, this is ridiculous. You know, I'm not getting protected, and I'm tiny. I mean, I weighed 90 pounds when I started high school. So
wow.
Anyhow, I didn't play for a few years, and then I went back out for my senior year. And by the time I got to my senior year, I was probably 6'3" and, you know, 160 pounds. So still super, super thin, but I always could, you know, pound a soccer ball, and I had technically learned how to punt. But even in high school, I wasn't kicking it super far or anything. But technically I was pretty good. I was sweet. You know, I'd hit a lot of spirals, and, you know, it took more till college when I walked on and discovered the weight room and what that's about. And by about 20 years old, I was, you know, 6'4", 225, and it was different at that point. But I think I was fortunate the reason I survived early on was because technically I learned how to do it properly. And then the athleticism came, the explosion came. Whereas I think a lot of times most kids that get the opportunities are the more gifted players physically, and it's hard to learn the technique if you've always lent on that. So, anyways, it's you know, I wouldn't trade the path that I took for anything. It's definitely, you know, I look at myself in the NFL, and I pride myself on. You know, a lot of people can say they're the best at this or that, or they try to. I would say that in my career, I feel like I've been the best technically the best punter in the NFL for the past decade. Maybe some guys can kick it further or higher, but I'm a precision guy. I'm trying to throw darts to the sideline. And it's just funny how those things that were there at the beginning, that's all I could lean on, is why I've had such a successful career.
That's really cool. Thomas Morstead's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. So you mentioned college being a poignant time, and maybe that's the next book, right? The College Rules of Thomas Morstead. SMU, it takes you to Southern Methodist University. You're in Dallas, and obviously something takes place because you talk about a lot of the lessons that you learned when you're in college. Take us to that point and kind of where you were maybe as a man. We want to talk about your faith journey as well, and maybe that's a big part of that. So take us through college and maybe a lesson or two and some of the things that took place for you as you grew into the person that you became.
Well, look, college was very tough for me. When I went to SMU, I didn't know one person there. So that was stressful in its own way. I had this perception of a rich kid college and not fitting in that way. And I think anybody that at that age that doesn't at least acknowledge some bits of insecurity or you know, vulnerable feelings is, you know, they're probably not human. So anyways, I went there, and I actually almost transferred after my first year. I wasn't getting any opportunities at the time. I had a girlfriend back in my hometown. Mom convinced me to stick around. I made Dean's List my first year, and she just said, "Hey, look, you're going to get your opportunity. You're going to get your shot. You just got to keep doing what you're doing." And she was right. So I stuck around, and really, I was I was the lowest man on the totem pole as a walk-on punter at a small school. So I really didn't say much when I was there. I just worked out and trained as hard as I could. And my strength coach, a guy by the name of Chuck Fawcett, midway through my third semester, said, "Hey," we were on the bye week, and he said, "Hey, Thomas, you've worked your butt off for these past, however long you've been here, and none of these coaches know who you are. You need to. It's the bye week that they're going to let some guys get some opportunities in practice. You need to find a way for the coaches to know who you are this week." So I went out to practice early one day. And I made a bet with our defensive coordinator at the time that I could kick a 60-yard drop kick from my rugby, some of my learned rugby skills. Mm-hmm. And he took the bet, and I made it. And they had to let me kick in practice, and they let me kick field goals, which I'm not even a field goal kicker. And I went 3 for 3, and they let me punt that day as well. And I just went off, and 3 weeks later I was on full scholarship.
Wow.
And so that was pretty cool. And then a month later, they said they made a mistake, and they pulled my scholarship from me. And so I remember having a conversation with my head coach at the time, Phil Bennett, and I'd never, ever spoken disrespectfully to another man in authority. And I kind of came out of my shell for the first time in my life and stood up for myself, and let him hear how I felt. And that, I would say, that was probably the biggest moment in college for me, was just feeling like you had earned something, have it taken away unfairly, and to stand up for yourself. I would never have done that before, but I almost felt like I was on the moral high ground. And so I just, I call it communicating at the highest level. Let them know exactly how I felt. And I ended up being on scholarship my last 3 years. And I think that was a pivotal moment for me to learn to stand up for myself with confidence. And once I realized that wasn't as daunting of a thing as I had always perceived it to be, I think I've done that my whole career now, always communicating at the highest level. And it's conflict. Leadership is often about dealing in conflict. And I've been fortunate to be forced into that situation at an early age, and to have a grown-up conversation. And I think that's been a blessing for me my entire career, because I would say that's been one of the staples of my career now, is just, if we want to be at the highest level, I've got to be able to communicate with my coach about what I need. He's got to be able to communicate with me about what he needs from me. And we've got to figure a way to both coexist, and to, sometimes goals don't always match up. And so you got to find ways to work together to get all that done. And so it's been a blessing for me to go through that.
We'll get back to our conversation with Thomas Morstead in just a second, but I want to tell you some more about our friends at IJM, the International Justice Mission. What many people don't realize right now is that violence is a threat around the world, all around the world, to people who are poor. It's as much a part of daily life as hunger, disease, or homelessness. And it's often overlooked, but not by IJM. They believe that every person, we believe this as well, every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. By partnering with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, bring criminals to justice, restore survivors, and strengthen justice systems, IJM helping to protect, I love saying this, more than 150 million people from violence across the world. 150 million people. IJM's work is so important, but they cannot do it alone. They need your help. They need our help. That's why I'm reaching out to you to consider joining them and becoming a Freedom Partner. Freedom Partners are some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice, and their support of $24 or more each month helps survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued until they're fully restored. It may not seem like a lot to give, but it's life-changing, so I'm encouraging you to join me right now in becoming a Freedom Partner. It makes a huge difference in the world. Visit ijm.org/TF. ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner today. Now back to our conversation with Thomas Morstead from the New Orleans Saints, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Walk me through the maturation of your faith. Where does your faith sort of take shape for you, and how has that kind of matured, especially coming through college and into being selected in the NFL, which is an amazing story when you're a punter. Most punters, a lot of them don't get drafted into the NFL, and you did by New Orleans. But walk me through the journey of your faith and kind of the shape that took for you.
Yeah, look, I mean, I remember growing up, my mom took us to church every Sunday, and it was a valuable part of growing up. And most of my really close friends were from my church. And so I think I was just fortunate to have a good group of people there. Not everybody has that. And, a lot of those relationships are the ones that have stood the test of time. So I think that's, you don't know that till as time goes on. But, I think, you go through a time where you start to think for yourself and you start to question things. And I think that's natural. I think that's good. And I think I've been very fortunate that the times that I've kind of strayed off to the side or not stayed on the straight and narrow, I've been fortunate to kind of always come back to the foundation. And and I also think that I've been very fortunate that whenever I have done that, I've been rewarded. And so there's been a lot of positive reinforcement for me personally with that. And, I would say the number one person that's been instrumental in that is my wife, honestly. I can't explain what she's meant to me in that area. And, I'm very fortunate to have her as not only my wife, but the mother to my kids. And, I would say now it's just, when you hear people talk about that needs to be the center of your life, what does that mean? It means different things to different people. And all I can tell you is that that's definitely become the case for us. And I think it just kind of, one of the lessons in the book is kind of analogous to this. It's like, you don't let outside influences kind of have an effect on your joy. So it's more of a decision, right? It's a foundational piece that you just always know is there, never changes, never wavers. And when everything else is unstable in your life, that's not. And I think that's one of the kind of testaments for anybody that has that, is that they can tell you that there's an unwavering piece to their life that's always there. And I think that's really valuable, not only for your life here, but I think it's valuable to share with other people, because I think people that don't have that deep down want it. And so, I was fortunate my first year and my third year to have two kickers that were about as strong and faith-based people as you'll ever meet. John Carney, my first year, and John Casey, my third year. And both of those guys, they were just in the locker room and guys just gravitated towards them. What is it about them? Where's this unreal level of self-security, confidence about who they are and what they stand for? And that to me is what it's like to be a light, and I was fortunate to see that. And so I try to be that for other young guys now that I've, one of the old dogs in the locker room. And so it's a pretty cool thing when you see it walking. Guys don't always know what it is, but they just know they want it. They want to have something like that. So I've been fortunate to have that.
Was there a moment for you when you came to the NFL, and you've been blessed to be on the same team your entire career, which is not common for a lot of players, obviously. You've won a Super Bowl. You've been in a Pro Bowl. You've had a lot of great moments, and you played. Now you're going into year 12 here in 2020. But walk me through the moments where you realize that you can't just rely on being the young guy and having, not that we all shouldn't have mentors. I mean, I'm in my 40s and I need mentors for me as well.
Yep.
But there's a moment where you're not the young guy anymore, but you're not the veteran dude, maybe the old dog like you call yourself now, but somewhere in the middle where you realize that you're not just the one who is, receiving the information and want to learn, but you also want to be the guy, or you realize that you are a guy that can instill that wisdom, that can be that example for Christ, that can be that example as a leader, as a mentor. Was there a moment for you where you realized maybe somewhere in your journey that this was something that you were being called to do?
I don't know that there's an individual moment. I know that whenever I was around those guys that were most helpful, that were the biggest leaders in all sorts of areas,
right,
that I wanted to be that. I wanted to be those guys. And so I don't know that there's a singular moment, but I do know that you get older in the locker room very quickly. So, one of my sources of personal pride that I've taken is try to mentor, especially specialists that have come into the building over the past number of years. And, 4 years ago, we had this young kid come in named Will Lutz, and he's like family to me now. And, there was a period of just taking him under your wing, trying to download him with as much information, experience as possible, because I got that as a young player. And that's why I think I would have still been successful, but I don't think I would have accelerated as quickly. I wouldn't have, my learning curve was quick because of those guys. And I tried to do that with Will. And at the end of the day, I'm not taking any credit for him because he's good enough. He's got whatever it is that there is to be successful. He has it, but it has been special to pour into him as much as possible, and to see him now successful, to see him confident, to see him now pouring into other people. That's kind of a what you give will grow concept that I love to live by. You can't keep anything, right? You gotta give it all at some point. So I just have this philosophy of always trying to give as much as you can, mentor these guys, and now it's weird transition now because Will, I know that he's seen my mentorship as valuable, but he's not my little brother anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He's a freaking Pro Bowler,
right,
stud kicker in the league. And so it's kind of like that transition from, kind of seeing somebody as this pie in the sky that you're trying to get to. And now I view him as an equal, and I'm sure he does as well. And so there's a transition there as well of kind of like, all right, Dad, I've had enough. I've got the information, I got this now. And so, which is cool, because that's what you want. You want to kind of raise, no different than your kids. You want to raise them to where they don't need anything from you. You just hope they want to hang out still. So.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Thomas. This has been great. Last couple questions here. You mentioned giving and the opportunity to give back. This foundation that you have, what you give will grow. You actually founded it with your wife, and you talked about your wife and how much of a spiritual inspiration she's been to you, among other things, I'm sure, in terms of being, your wife and the mother of your children. Tell me about the foundation. What you give will grow, and kind of maybe the birth of it, what the mission, I guess, of the ministry would be.
Yeah. So we do a lot of stuff for children in New Orleans. We have a special, we specialize in kind of pediatric oncology work, a lot of child life work in the hospital, which, if you don't know what child life is, that's kind of like the Patch Adams effect in the hospital. Helping kids remain kids. There's a lot of PTSD type of stuff with kids that go through, especially chronic diseases where they have to face some mortality. And I had a very close friend of mine that always said that was the most valuable thing in the hospital that got the least amount of money and attention. And it's because insurance doesn't cover any of it. And so, it's been fun because there's not a lot required to move the needle in that area. So we've really tried to do that. And anyhow, it's just been, it's been very rewarding. I do feel like it's an obligation if you're a professional athlete in a city to do what you can. Not only from an image standpoint to be a role model for the people that follow you, but, there's people that are shelling out, lots of money to go to games. They're, people plan their years around our seasons and things like that. And so I think it's important that you try to find ways to impact that group of people in a positive way on the back end. And so we've really tried to do that. We put a prom on every year for all these kids that are dealing with cancer and blood disorders and things like that to kind of, we've got nurses and doctors there to kind of handle some of the logistical issues with what they're dealing with. But it's cool. It's a way for them to have a night out, forget about what they're going through. But also they end up being a resource for each other. These kids, they end up creating their own network because nobody knows what they're going through except for them. Right. So they all become friends and connect, and the families, we throw a party for the families as well. That's separate because who wants their parents at their prom? But we throw a party for the parents as well, and they all connect, and they can all use each other as a resource too. So that's been a really special part of it. And then we just do grants to other organizations in New Orleans that we think are doing really, really powerful things. And so we just try to kind of put a little extra coal in the fire for some of these other organizations that do good things in our city.
I have to imagine that you giving back, it does a lot for you as well. Like it's given a lot to you as well.
No question. It's very rewarding. And what it does is it perpetuates, right? So the more you give, the more you give, the more you get, the more you give again. And it kind of, I wish everybody could, it was in a position, perception wise, people don't feel like they're in a position a lot of times to give, but maybe it's your time. Maybe it's sharing something on social media. I wish everybody could feel the tangible benefits that I get to see, because that's the best part. The fundraisers are great, but it's when you actually are on the ground and you see the impact that's being had. That's really cool. And I think when you put yourself out there without knowing what's going to end up happening, it's always better than you expect. And so, I wish that everybody could have the opportunity to see how fulfilling it is to help people that are struggling or that are in need. And look, I think the thing that's really hardest for me now is that there's so many people in need. You can't help everybody, but everybody can help somebody, and I think if everybody just kind of took that attitude in their daily life, be pretty shocking to see how good it would get.
Yeah, that's a great point there. Thomas Morstead's our guest, New Orleans Saints punter. The new book, The Middle School Rules of Thomas Morstead, is out now. Go get it. It's a really great one especially for the kids. Last question. We asked this to all of our guests, Thomas, here on Sports Spectrum. What's the Lord showing you and teaching you right now? It's a crazy kind of year, 2020, right? With the pandemic and all the other things that are going on in our country. God's teaching a lot of us all different sorts of lessons, it feels like, every single day. What's the great lesson the Lord has shown you right now?
I'm going to have to steal from my buddy Benjamin Watson. I'm sure you guys know who he is.
We love Ben, yeah.
Yes. His wife actually put something out a few months ago when the pandemic had just gotten going. And to hear people, kind of the people put their whole emotional state out on social media these days. And
yes, they do.
Just hearing her talk about the chance to go back to the inner circle that you affect, which is just in your home with your children, and taking that opportunity to pour into them, spend time. Sure, it's stressful. Kids are in the pantry all the time trying to get all the snacks out, and you don't have the help.
Yeah.
But the chance to go back to the basic unit level of the family and just refresh, recalibrate, and go back to what's important. Man, that's been the silver lining in all this for us. It has been, and I think, it's been so refreshing in our neighborhood this whole spring. Everybody's out riding bikes. Obviously we're social distancing, but there's been there's no one's been allowed to be on the hamster wheel. No one's been allowed to be running. We got to get the kids to practice. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to do this. We got to do that. Yep. People have just existed and been together. And I think a lot of people, and this has nothing to do with socioeconomic, I would almost argue it's worse for people that have more. We're on this hamster wheel all the time, and just get back to the family, sitting down, eating dinner together, talking to each other, spending time. I think that's been the big recalibration hopefully for a lot of people are doing that. And I know that it's been a silver lining for us.
Thomas Morstead, congrats on the new book. Thank you so much for your time here on the show. Been a great treat to have this conversation with you. All the best to you as you go into year number 12 in the NFL. And thanks for joining us.
Jason, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And many thanks to Thomas Morstead from the Saints for joining us today on Sports Spectrum's podcast. He was really good. I mean, what a humble dude he is. And you could just sense that a very appreciative guy in all that the Lord has allowed him to accomplish now going into year 12 as an NFL punter, a Pro Bowl punter, a Super Bowl champion, and now an author. Again, get his new book. It's called The Middle School Rules of Thomas Morstead, as told by Sean Jensen. And there's a whole series, the Middle School Rules series, that's out there for you parents who may be impacting, and coaches too, impacting kids from, say, ages 7, 8 years old till 12, 13. Man, these books are perfect to get and read through with your kids, with maybe the kids that you coach. You want to give them a gift. The Middle School Rules of Thomas Morstead is a great gift for your child. Check it out everywhere books are found. And again, thanks to Thomas Morstead for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. We also thank our sponsors, IJM, the International Justice Mission. You can become a part of the great work they're doing in the fight against violence and oppression by going to their website, ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF. We also want to direct you to our website, sportspectrum.com. That is the home base for all of our content here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. Sportspectrum.com. There's articles there telling the stories of athletes and other people in the world of sports intersecting with their faith in Jesus Christ. We also have devotionals every single morning that you can go through for about 2 to 3 minutes right there on the website at sportspectrum.com. And every single podcast is there as well. I mean, we have over 500 podcasts now, which is just insane to think about with this show now that it's over 3.5 years old in its birth back in actually March of 2017. And so all of the content can be found there. You can go back and listen on demand right at sportspectrum.com. And lastly, if you could do us just a quick favor, if you're listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts, do us a favor, click the subscribe button on the Apple Podcast app so you never miss an episode. And then if you could, just leave us a review. It's really easy. You just go to the review section, you click on whether it's a 3 or a 4 or a 5-star review. Hopefully it's a 5-star review and you like today's show. But click that subscribe button and then leave a review. It really does help get the word out for all that we're doing with the Sports Spectrum podcast. Again, my name is Jason Romano. You can reach me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com. And I thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. We'll see you next time. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.